All right, let's jump right into one of the biggest stories ever told, the Exodus. But here's the thing, we're going to look at it in a way you might not have before. This comes from the work of a theologian named Milton Spenser Terry, who had this brilliant idea. He said, what if the Exodus isn't just history? What if it's actually a divine drama?
And that single idea, that one thought, it's the key that unlocks the whole thing. Terry's point is, if you start seeing the Exodus like a play, with acts and scenes all laid out, then suddenly its deeper lessons and, this is crucial, its massive influence on later apocalyptic writing, well, it all starts to make a lot more sense. This is really the framework we need for everything else we're about to cover.
So, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll set the stage with this whole idea of a divine drama. Then we'll look at Moses' prophetic calling. After that, we dive into the judgments on Egypt, and finally we'll connect all the dots and see how this ancient play echoes straight into the New Testament's book of Revelation. Let's get into it. Okay, let's kick things off with Act 1. Before we even touch on the plagues or the crossing of the Red Sea, we've got to get our heads around this theatrical framework Terry is talking about. It's all about seeing the grand, almost cinematic design behind the entire story.
So why look at it this way? Well, what's so powerful about this approach is that it lifts us out of just a simple, and then this happened, and then that happened. Instead, you start to see this incredibly well-crafted narrative. Every single part is designed to build on the one before it, revealing something huge about divine power, about justice, and about redemption. It's not just a story, it's storytelling with a sacred purpose.
And get this, Terry actually breaks the whole thing down into 7 distinct acts. You can see the whole story arc right here. It kicks off with that divine call at the burning bush, it builds and builds through conflict and these insane judgments, and it all wraps up with a huge triumphant celebration. It's this structure, this flow, that gives the story its incredible power and momentum.
All right, let's dig into those opening acts. This is where we see how the drama really starts to build. It's where our main character, Moses, gets his mission, and the central conflict, God versus Pharaoh, is officially set up. The stage is absolutely set for an epic showdown. So Act 1, the burning bush. Now this isn't just some random, bizarre miracle. It is packed with symbolism. Think about it. The bush is on fire, but it doesn't burn up. Terry says this is a symbol for Israel itself, caught in the fires of Egyptian oppression, yet totally indestructible. It's a powerful visual promise that these trials are meant to purify, not destroy.
Then we get to Act 2, and this is a major plot twist. God reveals a new name, Jehovah. And you have to understand, this is a huge deal. Up until now, the patriarchs like Abraham and Isaac knew God as El Shaddai, right? God Almighty. But this new name, Jehovah, it signals something different, something more personal, a deeper covenant. It's basically a declaration that a brand new chapter in this whole divine human story is about to begin.
And that brings us to Act 3, the first real taste of the conflict. You know the scene. Aaron's rod turns into a serpent and then swallows up the serpents from Pharaoh's magicians. This is way more than just a magic trick. It's the first symbolic punch being thrown. It's a prelude, a little sneak peek, that shows this fight isn't just with Pharaoh. It's a showdown with the entire belief system, with all the gods of Egypt.
Okay, now we're getting to the real heart of the drama, the rising action. This is where the tension just goes through the roof. A series of divine judgments are about to be unleashed on Egypt, and it's going to push this entire conflict right to its breaking point.
And that brings us to the 4th and longest act in this whole play, the 10 plagues. What we're seeing here is just a relentless, absolutely overwhelming show of divine power. It's all designed to do one thing, break the will of the most powerful ruler on the planet. And each plague is like its own terrifying scene in this act. And the pacing here is absolutely critical. As Terry points out, these plagues are not random at all. They escalate. Each one gets worse, building in power and in horror. It creates this inescapable feeling of dread. It's a crescendo of judgment, really, that's designed to show just how pointless Pharaoh's resistance truly is. So, what are these plagues all about? Well, on one level, they're a raw exhibition of power over the forces of nature. On another, they're a total smackdown of Egyptian superstition. But here's the most important part for later on. Their imagery, the darkness, the fire and hail, the death of the firstborn, all of that becomes a blueprint. It's literally borrowed by the author of Revelation to describe the trumpets of woe and the bowls of wrath. The connection is direct. And right in the middle of that final, terrible plague, we get the 5th act, the Passover. Now, this isn't just something that happened once.
It becomes this lasting institution. It's a ritual that symbolizes the redemption of Israel, that very specific moment they were saved from the judgment that was falling all around them.
All right, for our final section, let's look at the payoff. We're going to see just how deeply this ancient drama is literally baked into later apocalyptic writing. The Exodus story doesn't just end in the Old Testament. It provides the very language, the imagery, the whole blueprint for the ultimate story of judgment and redemption in the book of Revelation.
And I mean, the parallels are just jaw-dropping. Take Pharaoh's army chasing Israel. That gets echoed in Revelation with the dragon spewing a river to sweep away the woman. Israel standing triumphant after crossing the Red Sea, that becomes the vision of the victorious multitude standing by a glassy sea. And the Song of Moses, that celebration of freedom, it's sung again, but this time it's called the Song of Moses and of the Lamb. It's clear, the Exodus is the original template.
So this really forces us to kind of redefine what we mean by judgment in a biblical sense. The plagues aren't just punishments thrown out at random. They are explicitly called great judgments. And Terry argues they are the masterclass, the primary example of how God executes judgment on wicked and oppressive nations.
And this leads us to a key prophetic idea, the great and terrible day of Jehovah, or the day of the Lord. Now, here's the crucial part. This phrase usually doesn't mean a single, far-off, end-of-the-world event. Instead, it's a term the prophets used for any massive, world-shaking, divine intervention in history, just like the plagues in Egypt, that brings judgment and massive change.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? When you see the phrase Day of Judgment in these texts, the first image that comes to mind probably shouldn't be a giant cosmic courtroom. Terry argues the core truth is much more immediate and historical. It's about a fundamental principle, that God intervenes in history to condemn and punish enemies, while at the same time causing the obedient to triumph.
And so that leaves us with a pretty powerful question to think about. If we shift our perspective, if we stop thinking of judgment as just one future event in a courtroom, and instead start seeing it as a recurring great and terrible day, a pattern of divine intervention that has happened before and can happen again, how does that completely change the way we read these ancient, powerful texts?